With Mahesh Joshi. We're going to discuss the most pressing question of the current times. How do you run your business, or let's say companies, in the age of enormous data overload and distractions? I have with me today the right person to address this topic, Mr. Gaurav Rastogi, a true corporate yogi. And he is with us to discuss the importance of aligning the personal traits like technical capabilities or subject matter expertise, etc., with spirituality. How do you get focus? How do you get performance? Getting all of them aligned in the age of distractions. Now let me introduce Gaurav. Gaurav Rastogi is the co-founder of an artificial intelligence startup, Infinote.com, which he started after a very long and successful career in sales transformation at an $8 billion software services company. He is MBA from the #1 program in India. It's called Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad. He is author of 2 business books, and he himself believes that the future of work is going to be very different from the monolithic corporate model that we are all familiar with. Maybe we are already seeing it with some of the companies disappearing. And he also feels that companies will tap into distributed workforces that are shared with other companies, and that as employees will mix work in learning in quick cycles. He says, computers were once people too.
That's true, Mahesh. Hi, happy to be here. Computers were once people too. In the earlier 20th century, computing was done by people. So if you had to calculate the trajectory of a rocket as it's going into the Earth's atmosphere and then coming back down, someone needed to compute it. And typically that was just a bank of people working on those calculations. So computers were once people too. And similar to that, a lot of human jobs that we do today, those designations will soon no longer apply to human workers, but to digital labor, AI of some sort. So yeah, computers were once people too.
Yeah, it's the terminologies are coming back. It's the cycle is completing, and also he believes that much of what we currently dislike about work is repetitiveness and the lack of satisfaction, and it will all be done by computers and artificial intelligence. And that's what his own startup, Infinote, is all about. But there is another amazing side of Gaurav, beyond being a successful corporate leader, having run and managed large corporation, which makes him very, very interesting. He's also known as EKras Gorakh, his spiritual name. And he's founder of non-profit Mantra Chakra Foundation, and that promotes healthy living through meditation and yoga. Now you see the combination where it's coming from: corporate life, technocrat, meditation, yoga, a complete picture here: body, mind, soul, physically, mentally, spiritually. So he's also a meditation teacher with very advanced yoga credentials. And he has also co-authored one meditation ebook and a podcast on meditation called Living Meditations, which is available on iTunes and many other places. So welcome, Gaurav. It's nice to have you on this program for this very interesting discussion today.
Namaste, happy to be here.
Yeah. So, Gaurav, just to give a preamble to our discussion, I know we'll have a lot of things to cover later in the program. I would put this way, that we are all living in an age of distraction and destruction. Distraction, I would rather put enormous. The old world is being destroyed before our own eyes, whether it is politics, whether it is technology, whether it is business, or it is economies. But it is the distractions that pose a larger threat. That's not allowing us to focus. We are distracted by constant change, the frantic news cycles, and weaponization of the technologies of mass distraction, such as social media and 24/7 communication. That's all around us. And now let's look at the lifestyle and business. the discussion of the quantum speed of change in lifestyle, business, and environment are widespread. It's going on everywhere. You can call it from Buffalo to Beijing. Any part of the world, you can see it. The new technological innovations, business models are threatening existing legacy business players. And in one of our earlier programs, we had certain data that the top 5 companies by market cap, maybe not more than 2 decades ago, had only one technology company. And now there are 5. All 5 are technology. Everything else has disappeared. And I wouldn't be surprised if we find out most of them are the startups which have come up in the last 2 or 3 decades. That's a big change. Now, these legacy businesses were not weak. They were strong. And there was little thought that anything could change them. They were so big. However, as with most of the changes, those do not pay attention, they pay the price for that. And that seems to be happening. And if vigilance is not a common trait and no one is watching where the disruption is coming from, the ramifications are inevitable. You cannot avoid it. And in the current environment, the amount of data bombarding you is enormous. It's so huge. And in this age of high intensity distraction, how do you perform? And that's always bothering me in my thought process. How do you perform efficiently and keep your business relevant? Where and how do you focus? And let's see, how does the business world work? For our further discussion in later on segments, let's break it for simplicity into 3 parts. One is, let's address somebody who's heading a business, a leader. And I'm using terminology from one of your articles, the man on the mountain. I would like to know more about it later on, but I love that word which you use. So how does that man behave? What traits are needed? How should he train himself? Or maybe he doesn't need to be trained. But for survival in today's world, maybe it's needed. Second is, that's the guy who is passing instructions is not the right word, but giving direction, setting direction. There is a level in every organization which is picking up those directions, adding more value into it, and taking it to the next level. And the next level is getting the direction. Let's call it the 3rd level. You're simplifying the organization into 3, and that gets those direction, again adds value, which they should as human beings, and then they are delivering it. So now I'll pass on to you to start with the very first segment on the leaders. And I would still use the word the man on the mountain you used in one of your articles. What do you mean by that? And why that particular word?
The man on the mountain is still wanting. That was the name of my article. Here's what's going on. We were taught when we were in engineering undergrad and B school, that all your life you have to work hard and climb this mountain of your corporate ladder, right? Up the corporate ladder, and you get to the top, and then you're the king of the world, right? A few years on, you realize that there's this ladder is an unending ladder, and when you get to the top, the guy at the top is extremely unhappy, is extremely dissatisfied and disconnected with themselves, and is increasingly at a loss for direction for himself, and is unable to lead others because of this inability. So the man on the mountain is each one of us who's now a leader in their domain, whether it's politics or business. And on top of the mountain, it is super lonely at the top. Vivek Murthy, who was Surgeon General of the United States in the Obama administration, he wrote about it saying there's a loneliness epidemic. And he said that 50% of the CEOs feel lonely. And that's probably an understatement. So there is a problem at the top because the man on the mountain is wanting. And if the man on the mountain is wanting, why should anybody else climb this ladder? And how is it that someone who's at the top of the mountain is unable to see clearly? How will they lead as leaders? That's a big challenge of our times. How do you provide confidence? How do you provide courage to your team? How do you provide direction and clarity if you yourself are struggling for meaning and purpose or energy?
That's a tough one because the whole organization is looking at you and they want to draw from you, and you're thinking, okay, well, I'm here. What's my next motivation?
That's right. Yeah. Why should I show up to work every day?
Yeah, and what's my support mechanism? And especially when it takes time to become that leader, when you've taken so much of time to climb that mountain, and little realizing while you're climbing the mountain, the path to reach the mountain was changing.
Yeah.
And the environment around you was changing. And maybe when you reach the top, at the top the environment is changed and beyond what you were expecting. Now, how do you adapt to it? How do you still keep motivated? How do you discipline yourself?
Yeah, those are important questions. There's a lot of topics we can cover, but I'd break it down to 4 things that we should focus on. First is the leader's ability to handle time in very different ways, and I'll bring you the yoga perspective into it, so you're able to sort of appreciate. There's a lot of ancient wisdom available to us, whether it's the whole idea of time itself, spiritual energy. I call it the heart. That's really important for leaders in all ages, but especially now when there's less clarity in the mind. And the third is math, the ability to handle a new kind of math. The math we've been taught in school, the math we use at work, turns out is the worst kind of math at this point, and it's a small part of the math that's actually available to us. And finally, in Sanskrit we call it sanskar, but you could call it process or culture. How do you handle process and culture? Your own individual process, interpersonal process, but organizational processes and culture. Those are all important things. Let's talk about time.
I think this is very important because what you just said, that for leadership, the first point is, since you are always under the microscope, everybody is watching you, and you are setting the example, the self is very important. What's your personality? How do you come across? And to develop that, all these 4 pieces are very, very important. So what we're going to do is, why not we focus on self first, and that self, what do you stand for, who you are, how do you conduct yourself, how do you conduct business, how do you motivate yourself. So those 4 pieces we will address in our next section. We'll call, as for the man on the mountain, the leader, as self, your personality. We'll take a short break now, Gaurav, and we will discuss on self after the break.